there you are. Welcome back to the Food for the Faithful channel. With this today, not so reluctant a prophet, let's discuss why we are living in an age of Orwellian memory holding. The sheer number of times the legacy media attempts to alter the facts of what they previously reported as news is proof they aren't in pursuit of the truth, but rather are deliberately socializing forced conformity to the state's arbitrary dictates. This reality has now become demonstrable fact. Their repeated attempts to justify the failure of the government's pandemic policies, its resulting attack on constitutional rights, and the disastrous results of lockdowns on the economy are only further compounded by the absolute botching of the COVID inoculation's effectiveness and safety. The press deliberately ignored the fact that the inoculant had been developed in the same laboratory where the CCP had been working on developing bioweapons for military purposes, and that the Canadian government had helped the CCP to do so. This help included funding, cooperating, and sharing deadly pathogens with the communist Chinese military. To add insult to injury, the press ignored that Trudeau's government mischaracterized us by claiming that to recognize that the regime responsible for oppressing and murdering its own citizens somehow makes us into racists, while choosing to ignore the fact that the CCP poses an extrinsic threat to the Chinese people themselves as well as to the rest of the world. I'm old. I couldn't care less what anyone thinks about me. Canada is my country. My ancestors carved this land out of trackless wilderness to create a constitutional government with parliamentary oversight under God. No other people managed to unite this vast land under the rule of law. People from all over the world have flocked to Canada because it was once a land of freedom and opportunity. I will not willingly surrender my heritage to either a government which does not respect this heritage or to backward immigrants who have screwed up their own countries of origin only to come here to do the same to mine, rather than staying to fight for liberty in their own homelands. And yes, I may be universally despised for being an outspoken defender of classical liberalism, Enlightenment values, free markets, capitalism free of state control, free speech, rational discourse, ethics, epistemology, and ontology. Yes, I despise gaslighting and tautology. Of course, I am sickened by sexual perversion and pedophilia. Most certainly, I do not believe that the state should operate outside of its proper function of enforcing the rule of law within our borders while defending said borders. I believe fundamentally in the separation of church and state. Moreover, I have become convinced that Canada has become a neo-Marxist hellhole, since cultural Marxists have captured all of our institutions, from our universities to the corporate boardrooms, to our schools, to the floors of parliaments, both federally and provincially, onto our enormous oversized authoritarian bureaucracy, which in some cases exercises more control over us than do our elected representatives. In summation, I am convinced that save for a revelation, I see no way out of our current prevailing crisis of conscience. Certainly not politically, because this isn't a political problem. Rather, we are living in a moral, philosophical, and spiritual crisis which challenges the very nature of being itself, irrespective of what the state has altered our official state documents to read, where impossible genders are offered as options. since no one can know God without a revelation of him. It would be stupid for me to attempt to justify the existence of God to anyone who lacks revelation. For once God gives you a vision of himself through his Son, no further evidence will be needed. If and when you encounter the reality of all realities, there can be no denying what truth is, and without such an experience, no amount of reason will be sufficient to explain this mystery of all mysteries. It is the fear of God which is the beginning of all wisdom, since to know him is to both be filled with awe and the absolute certainty that lying is merely an attempt to distort the very nature of reality itself. You cannot cheat reality, and you cannot lie to God. This is, of course, why, in the absence of divine revelation, man chooses to lie to himself, and that by living in lies, he is creating hell on earth. This is the path Trudeau's government has chosen, which is why the entire nation is suffering due to its government's deceit. Therefore, choose truth, since there can be no escaping it. And as you choose truth, condemn the fools who are filling Nietzsche's observation that since mankind killed God, that man would need to become his own God. This, of course, is an impossibility, since the government of Canada is not its own God, but rather follows the God of this world, the very father of all lies, Satan himself. This is demonstrated to us daily in the legacy media and in Hansard, where we hear repeatedly and metaphorically, "Hath God said?" as our fools in power challenge the very structure of existence. And if you lack revelation, I challenge you to do the following. Ask God to grant you one, even if you do not believe there is a God, and then watch what happens. You may find yourself on a journey in pursuit of truth you never thought possible, where remaining silent in the face of this wickedness will be impossible. And now you know why I refuse to shut up, since I cannot stay silent. I've mentioned to you in the previous vodcast that Anasiri and I went out and purchased the book entitled The 1867 Project, which is a series of essays edited by Dr. Mark Milka. I strongly advise you go get it, because in that book you will find these series of essays explaining from many different perspectives why Canada has become a very illiberal and authoritarian place and has chosen to ignore its heritage. We are here to make sure that the foundations that were once laid are built upon and not torn down. These are things to think and pray about as we continue to watch our country decay under a class of leadership that is absolutely classless. They've bitten the head off of shame, and it appears that they're capable of doing anything. Nothing surprises me anymore, which is why I'm so heartily disgusted by what I have to see day in and day out. Have a great day.